When Fiona blushed at the Winter King, I said, "Ah, geez." When Fiona kissed the Winter King, I said, "Oh no." And when the Winter King's ice crown was drained of all its magic from Fiona's heightened emotional state and alternate Simon became a corpse, I exclaimed, "Hell yeah!" That is my sort of fictional infatuation, the kind that ends with someone decaying into a husk. And then, after Fiona blushed from Princess Bubblegum's kiss on the cheek, I chuckled at the bisexuality of the moment. Wow, what an episode! Gotta give massive props to Princess Bubblegum / Candy Queen's voice actor, Hynden Walsh killed it!
Baby, why you gotta be like that?
What a twist on the familiar Bonnabelle voice we're all accustomed to. How many songs has PP had again? That dopey but affectionate Lemon Hope song, and some brief singing when she was an elementally overcharged giant wad of gum? Now I am thinking that Bonnabelle should have had a showstopper performance in like the episode Music Hole or something, cause wow, this new musical number titled Baked with Love is gonna be stuck in my head for a while.
Just like cake needs to rise if you look in my eyes.
While the Candy Queen's lyrics were
Not a metaphor.
the Ice Prince in Fiona's dreams very much was, but Fiona mistakes the figurative for the literal.
This is going to sound nuts, but I think I've been dreaming about you.
I wouldn't be at all surprised.
The Winter King, the character, not the episode, was so very, very extra. His behavior gave me vibes of Patient St. Pim, but smoothed over with like Adderall or something. To me, the Winter King immediately set off my "I don't trust this guy" signal, despite his zany friendliness and the amazing visual aesthetic during his musical number. A functional variant of the Ice King, free from any monkey paw type stuff, just doesn't register as correct in my brain, so something sinister just had to be at play with this guy. While watching the episode, my first hypothesis as to what the twist might have been was that the Winter King had covered the entire Land of Ooh in ice and was somehow harnessing magic across the land to counteract the insanity of the ice crown. Basically, I thought the Winter King might have been using everything outside his central kingdom as a magical battery to keep the crown in check while freezing the world in stasis. That idea, of course, went out the window when the Candy Queen arrived, and at that point, I wondered, is this a universe where the crowns are switched, and the Winter King was actually the princess of the Ice Kingdom, and also the Ice Elemental, while Princess Bubblegum would have worn the corresponding madness-inducing crown that was associated with Chatsberry in this universe, rather than with Evergreen. I thought that was like such an awesome idea, but it already didn't make sense at the time, because the Winter King had shown that he could not use his powers without wearing the crown.
Gives up.
And once I realized that, my mind just eventually stopped trying to guess what the twist was. While the deadpan jokes that delivered the twist were pretty comical, I would have liked to see a flashback to alternate Ice King actually conducting the curse that transferred his madness to Princess Bubblegum and allowed him to become the Winter King 100 years ago, and that was mostly because the pacing of the big reveal felt a bit clunky to me, although I very much did appreciate Prime Simon feeling vindicated over the whole ordeal. So, as awesome saucy as the Winter King was,
Kiss each other!
Don't think it hasn't occurred to me.
I do have my doubts on whether he could have recreated an actual working version of the Ice Crown.
Yes! Haha! I make everything better.
I guess I could buy it as long as the gang had to fetch some magical doohickeys to finalize the process or something along those lines. I found the Winter King's frosty palace to be very captivating. Ice King has made ice creatures in the past, but they were more crude, and he never amassed such a vast amount of ice beings to serve him as far as I can recall. That being said, classic Ice King put laser beams on his ice creatures, which automatically makes him more awesome than the Winter King. I don't make the rules, that's just how it works. My favorite servant of the Winter King was not an ice construct, but what appears to be a penguin with no feathers. On the King of Ooh Tumblr account, Steve Wolfhard had a written note in the concept art that they needed at least one largely unpleasant design, and I felt personally seen. It was fun how while Simon was in this snowy alternate universe, the world in his head began taking on a winter climate. And as you guessed, it's now time to talk about the hookup of Gary Prince and Marshall Lee. I think these moments provided a really quaint contrast to the bombastic and frenetic world of the Winter King. Considering how pretty basic Gary and Marshall growing closer was, I was taken aback by how much I became invested in them as a blossoming couple. Marshall's decision to help Gary was so very, very Marceline-ish, to word it stupidly. Marshall made a personal sacrifice in contacting his mom after going no contact so that she could use her existing corporate empire and leverage, something that Marshall views with disdain, to arrange an appointment with the lemon carbs that would otherwise be extremely difficult to secure. And he did this without consulting Gary or giving him time to prep, because of his rash in the moment spontaneity and lack of forethought. I really liked how Marshall was shown to have additional maturity though, in that he realized he screwed up on his own, but it was already too late. The highlight of the episode, for me personally, might just be that sequence that juxtaposes wholesomeness with murder. Gary explaining candy lore and the relationships they have with each other, while Fionna and Cake kill the corresponding candy citizens in various gory ways, was a morbid delight. It was a brilliant way to make the audience feel for these warped against their will candy denizens meeting their demise. Like, even though I knew these peeps were ultimately recreatable by PB, I still felt bad when their faces were ripped off their bodies. So I feel like I have to mention Young Ice Marcy. When the Winter King died, seeing that axe base next to the puddle was certainly a powerful image. If one wants a more happy interpretation, the real Marceline could have been defeated and frozen in ice, and was simply off-screen toward the end of the episode. The darker interpretation is that the Winter King had to slay Marceline when she wouldn't stop opposing him, and his guilt resulted in the construction of Ice Marcy, who, despite being the Winter King's own creation, still somehow needs to be imprisoned. That's dark. There's certainly lots of room for theory crafting what happened over the 100 years that shaped this alternate ooh differently compared to the one we're familiar with, especially with the apparent absence of Finn and Jake. So the following is not a plot hole because hindsight is 2020, but it's funny to think that had Fionna, Cake, and Simon immediately dipped out of this winter wonderland, their scarab problem would have been fixed, as long as the Winter King remained in control and Scrabby remained imprisoned. Considering Prismo is trapped in a cube in his own hot tub, the gang could have attempted to return to the time room and then free him while Scarab remained imprisoned in that inescapable ice. Like I said, I'm not calling this a plot hole, it's just a funny alternate course of events to think about. This episode ends in the baby world, where BMO was a baby monitor, and where Fionna finally reflects on seeing life like a video game.
Have I been hurting people in all these universes?
Yes, Fionna! The answer is yes! Simon's response to her was definitely not the best here.
And I'll be cursed the right way.
That's pretty much oxymoronic as far as curses go, Simon. You would think an antiquarian with enough know-how that he's able to reprogram Prismo's remote somehow would know that. But Simon really wants that fugue state back, I suppose. I'm gonna close out this review mentioning yet another appearance of the Lich, this time in baby form. I've mentioned in a prior video that having the Lich get involved might feel like too many cooks in the kitchen as far as this series is concerned, but the more he appears, the harder the dude gets to ignore. Will the Lich play a role in the climax to Fionna and Cake, or are the Lich's repeated appearances foreshadowing to stuff in an Adventure Time continuation that doesn't even exist yet? I don't know, but I did have this one thought that maybe Fionna and Cake could end up eradicating the Lich across the multiverse because they have Prismo's magic targeting remote and this weird ability to drain magic. And then maybe they could receive a pardon from Prismo's boss for performing such a task? But I'm not even sure I like that idea myself. Let me know any theories you might have and what you think the deal with a Lich might be, or just share your thoughts on this frosty and sweet episode in the comments. I don't always reply to comments, but I try to read most of them, and I'm really appreciative of when people share their thoughts. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.